All right, let's go. Hey guys, how's it going? Alex, how's your week been?
It has been an amazing week. I just got back from Chicago last night. Some of our teams were having an offsite out there. We got to go on the river. It was amazing. And then my flight late last night, I'm usually a very silent person on planes. It's kind of my like bubble, put my headphones in. And I seriously think I met two people that might have changed my life. I could not
Oh
go
my
to sleep
god.
afterwards. It was crazy. But I'll dangle that carrot out and I'll tell more later. But yeah,
Oh my
it's been a
god.
good week. Good week.
Wow, life-changing flights. I'm just jealous because Alex got to go see the rest of our team and I get severe FOMO. So much, I get FOMO so bad that I actually moved a holiday to go to my friend's wedding because I didn't want to be the only person in our group of friends not to go. So yeah. But John, how's your weekend?
Yeah, good. Enjoying the UK not being quite so hot. As a typical Brit, it's 30 plus Celsius, and we're all complaining it's too hot.
We're not built for it. We're just not
Nah.
ready. That week I had to like hug an ice pack on calls to stay kind of cool. It was terrible. All right, let's get into it. So, welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Stephanie Gooch, and I am a commercial architect at AWS.
And my name is Alex Head, and I lead the optics team that Steph is on for our strategic industries.
And today, this is a really interesting topic that if you saw the FinOps X video on our YouTube channel, Keys AWS Optimization on YouTube, check it out. We ran some interviews with people who attended, and one of the biggest things that they commented on, which was the next challenge in FinOps, was all about kind of getting your developers involved, trying to inspire them. And I met John at the summit, a while ago now, the London summit, and just happened upon his talk. And it was all about this topic. So he is ahead of the game. So we've brought him in here today to come and chat about this. So we'll do interest in a sec, but as always, feel free to put comments, questions in the chat. And if you're watching on YouTube, comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. So John, do you want to give your 1 minute origin story?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for inviting me to come on. So yeah, I'm CTO at Vertison. So we're a cloud consultancy. Among other things, we work with some of the largest customers of AWS and the other hyperscalers to help them optimize their cloud usage. My background, I'm a developer really, primarily experienced in financial services, so many years building trading systems at companies like Goldman Sachs. And I guess my first experience of what we now call FinOps was probably 15 years ago, figuring out how to navigate complex sort of multi-level cross-charging structures in a big company to explain to a head of trading why they were picking up tens of thousands charge for some system they'd never heard of and didn't know they use. And yeah, I now realize that was FinOps in the early days.
Yeah, awesome. So been at it for a long old time. So that makes you kind of, and coming from that developer mindset, will obviously help with this discussion because you have been on the other side and then can kind of implement. But what made you kind of get started with that conversation and have that at the summit in the first place?
I mean, one of the key things was the FinOps Foundation, which I imagine most people who are listening to the cast are familiar with. It does a member survey, 2 years running. Number one issue reported was getting developers to take action is the biggest challenge. We've worked with a lot of customers and kind of seen different ways that people have tried to solve that problem, both successfully and not. And so we sort of thought, yeah, you know what, actually, we've got some experience there. We've got something maybe we can bring to the community. And so that's where the idea came from.
Awesome. And shout out to Rob who's listening. Nice chat. Thank you, Rob. Courtesy of the FinOps Foundation, as Sean's plugged. Awesome. So we had this conversation when we did our prep call for this, that this video is targeted for people who are FinOps practitioners. So if you're out there and you're a FinOps practitioner, this video is for you to have this conversation. So to get the ball rolling, John, how would you normally approach this when you start this how would you approach this topic when you first start with developers?
So I mean, there are a couple of themes which we'll keep coming back to. And it's really, for me, it's all about understanding the context, understanding the world that those people live in, what it is that drives them, the challenges they've got. And and really about empathy for that. So it's very much sort of going in, doing homework, having sensible conversations, and helping them really.
Mm-hmm. And I think you touch on that word empathy is something that I don't know, Alex. I mean, when you think of doing stuff with developers, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't think of the word empathy. But now after talking to John, I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, how would you start things when you start talking with customers that have got to engage with their developers?
Yeah, well, I first off think it's really important that you don't, especially being in a role like the three of us, right? You don't come in to a customer, to a team, to any of that, just with what is going to be their game plan and how they should hit the ground running. That can be exciting and cool, but you have to want to learn, right? You have to learn from them. But overall, like my rule of thumb is if I'm talking to people on the technical side, usually their leadership is involved as well. And I want to tell them and really help them show their leadership what they've done really well first, and then where the opportunity is, right? Earn that trust first and show them that you've seen that maybe they're really good at Spot or they saved a lot of money switching to Graviton. Celebrate that win before just telling them what all the changes they need to do.
Yeah, great. That's very important. Go on, John.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, celebrating the wins and getting that relationship on a positive footing is so important. I mean, we've seen situations where we'll come in to help a customer. Maybe they've invested in a tool, been running for a year, was all meant to be great. Year later, the bill still appears to be out of control. Nothing's really happened, and often you come into that and find that it's been a very sort of acrimonious, pushy, you must do this kind of an approach. And you're really fighting an uphill struggle there to get people back on board and excited to do things and understand that actually, yeah, there is value here. There are good things you can do to save money that aren't going to cause you problems. So yeah, always approaching it with that positive mindset. And as you say, celebrating those successes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's our first tip is kind of empathy and start celebrating the first things, the wins that you've done. So, John, when we talked before, you mentioned kind of one of the first things you'll also do is try and take the signal from the noise. Is that what you said? Is that how you described it?
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, what you'll often find is somebody's invested in a tool, it's showing lots of opportunities. And people will say, great, I'll give this team access to see their stuff in the tool. Or, you know what, we'll do this by email. We'll send them a list of all the things that they could be fixing or should be fixing. And so you send them through 1,000 recommendations. Tool says they can save millions a year. You're really excited. Senior management are really excited. They're already planning next year's budget on all these savings having happened.
Oh dear.
And now put yourself in the engineer's shoes. Okay, so you've sent me a list of 1,000 EC2 instances, which you reckon I can right size. Okay, great. Don't really have time to wade through that. I can already see from a glance half of them look like nonsense. This is just going to be a big waste of time. I've got to focus on next week's release. And you've kind of lost them already. Maybe they look further and it's, well, these folks are clueless. Half of these belong to an ASG. Don't they know that you can't right size individual instances? We've got to think about the whole ASG. And you kind of, before you've even started, really, you've kind of lost them, and they've put you in that box of noise. People who are just going to waste my time and distract me from what I really should be doing. And so, yeah, it's really about not getting yourself in that place. It's kind of do some homework, try and figure out what you can up front.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember making this similar mistake when I was sending out budget alerts. Like I think budgets had just been released, and then we were just like spamming all the developers with budget alerts, and they were all over budget constantly because no one had set the right budget number, and so they just ignore it. And so giving them something that's actual information is very important. And that can also let you kind of prioritize. I mean, where have you? And maybe Alex, do you want to jump in? If like when you've had,
I would just add in. There's I'm going to put it up here. In the chat, saying, I imagine because John is a techie himself, it often positions you in a good spot when talking to people who have that engineering background. And I completely agree, right? I mean, that's our team. A lot of our team is from customers that we've like once supported or that have been in this position before. And I think that helps like be empathetic. But I also say, not every situation you go into, you're going to have the exact background that they're looking for or the right thing. But as long as you're asking the questions and genuinely want to learn, right? Figure out what is your motion and what are your goals. I think that it can help kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, I think the more you think about it in the initial engagement as it's a partnership you're building, you're here to help them achieve these savings. It's not kind of you're in control and they've got to do this stuff. It's kind of a partnership. Then yeah, like any relationship, it's kind of learn a bit about them, understand their world, and kind of take that into account. And so, I mean, kind of on the example of the 1,000 instances, so the kind of thing that I try to do there is, okay, I'll do a bit of homework, I'll go through the list. There's a lot of information even without having talked to a team. I mean, some of this may be getting a bit techie, but a lot of FinOps teams have got someone who can do this kind of thing. Maybe you spot a load of these belong to the same ASG. Maybe you spot, oh, there's a common name in here. That sounds like a system name. Let me search the intranet. Oh, look, that's this system. Okay, oh yeah, it is owned by this team. Right, okay, so here's context. This is all about this. And oh, look, there's prod and there's similar clustering QA. And then you get yourself to the point where instead of the initial engagement being, here you go, here's 1,000 things, good luck, it becomes, okay, we found this large prod ASG, you've got a load of R524X large instances. If we look back over the last month, none of them use more memory or CPU than a 4X large would use. If we add that up, that's 40K an instance if this could be done per year. That's over $1 million a year. Sounds really chunky. What do you think? Oh, by the way, we found a similar one in staging. Do you do stress tests automated in there? Maybe we could try it out there and check it's fine first. And you're going in with a much more specific thing, far less overwhelming information, not asking them to do all the work of wading through and pulling out the signal from the noise. You're doing that homework for them where you can, and here you go. Let's have a meaningful conversation about an idea.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I was always just about my own experience when I first started doing this at Amazon specifically. I was doing that. I was probably overloading my customers, and I was giving them a lot of recommendations at once. And I was also giving them a lot of data. And like you said, I needed to learn how to look for those trends, because before, when I was a customer, I knew all the accounts and I could just understand what was going on. But with them, you're right. You want to find those trends and say, oh, this account seems to have a problem. And one of mine, using like an EBS example, had like tons of unattached EBS volumes. And it was all because there was actually some kind of error that was causing it on their deployment. And so because I'd spent like 5 more minutes looking at the data and actually looking for that kind of grouping, I was like, oh, they actually solved the problem and solved a ton of money. So it's pretty cool.
Baby steps. Baby steps are helpful. I'm curious we've got some great chatter in the chat, but curious of people chiming in, honestly, I think we learn from others' mistakes better than anything. And like Steph said, coming in and showing data, I know that I've done that a lot of times where I walk in and I'm like, here's all the data, look at all these things you could do. And really that like wasn't going to resonate. So I'm curious of, what hiccups have you seen that don't work, right? What approaches have come across, very ineffective that kind of helped you learn from them? And feel free to chime in the chat.
Yeah, guys, jump in. There's loads of people who are great experts on here that can take this. So another thing I wanted to kind of leading on from Alex's as well, the next section that we spoke about as well, John, was like taking action. So you've given people data, understanding, and leads on from that empathy stuff. Is like how to take action. So what kind of tips do you have around that stuff?
Exactly, yeah. So it's kind of continuing the theme of it's about context, it's about understanding their world. But yeah, it's kind of you've got the point of, okay, you've had a great conversation. Maybe we can resize this ASG. The engineer maybe agrees in theory that the idea is sound. There's a big gap between that and it actually happening and you looking at the bill and there being a saving. And so it's really all about then apply the same ideas to that. So yeah, what's going to have to happen to get this done? Is the person you've spoken to and got the buy-in from the person who's going to do it? Are they the decision maker? Quite probably not. Who's going to have to approve and buy in? How's the change going to get made? Is it automated? Do they go and change a Terraform template and then on the next scheduled release it happens? Or is it some manual convoluted process? what are the change windows? Is there a freeze coming up? All those kind of things about how their system works. And in large organizations, this is often quite different for different teams. So if you're, as a lot of people are, working with lots of different teams, you kind of got to have this conversation with each team and understand their nuances. But yeah, it's really what's going to be involved, and in particular, figuring out, well, how can you help them with that? Don't put all the work of getting the buy-in or planning the change or whatever on them. If you can help in that, all the way from having conversations, putting together some slides to explain stuff, writing some automation if that's what they need help with, the more likely you are for this thing to actually happen.
Yeah, that's interesting as well. The idea of taking action, I think, is something that maybe, well, this may not be the case. I'm not speaking for all FinOps practitioners, but at the start we were like, okay, this is for practitioners. And a lot of practitioners might hear everything you just said and be like, oh, I can't write a script, or I don't know what infrastructure as code is. And we're not saying that you have to. I think getting some understanding of those concepts and terminology is really important, but it's also pushing for this connection to the development teams is what really makes the difference here, because they don't want you to go in your account and make a change. They don't really want you to change their Terraform or maybe even write a script. What they do want is the direction and the impact, so that they can do what Alex said at the start, which is show the wins, which is really important. But yeah, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm gonna add in Rob's thing here. I think it's so important. Number one rule for bad relationships: tell management how much you'll be saving before talking to the engineer, right? What we want to do, and especially on optics, our main goal is to come in and find new and strategic ways to work and help save and make the environment more efficient, right? If it was one size fits all, if it was like, hey, this works for every customer, then our team probably wouldn't exist. So, coming in, and I always like to use percentages, like, hey, if you use this, it'll be this percent difference, not actual dollar signs, because that gets very dangerous. But also knowing that exactly what John just talked on, right? Maybe you have to figure out a different way to automate it. Maybe there's a way to kind of embed it in their process, and partnering together and putting the two brains in the room, like whiteboarding and figuring that out, can be some of the best parts of our work, right? And finding out new cool ways to do things.
And also making it a fun thing to do. So Alex was touching on automation, which is something that I always bring up. But the things that we've seen customers, and I probably told these kind of stories before, but it's when someone takes a lot of effort to go and find all those idle volumes, for example. A developer's like, fine, I've got the tickets, I'll go delete them all. 2 months later, a whole bunch new idle volumes have come up because they haven't actually looked at the automation behind it or looked at the code that's causing that. And so putting some time into actually developing a solution that's going to mean that those developers don't have to worry about that task anymore is so much better than someone having to manually delete EBS volumes. Deleting EBS volumes is not fun. No one likes to do that. It's
not
not
top
fun.
of my list.
No. Saturday morning, just sitting there deleting volumes. No.
I think too, John, this would be a good segue for you. Eric's asking, hearing some themes here: inclusion, context, important for opportunities and optimization. Any advice on how to build that culture for customers that may not have it today?
I would certainly say get off on the right foot. So yeah, help people understand that you are here to help them. And it's we talked about the other day, it's having almost a customer service mentality. You're not here with the big stick to beat these guys up and make them achieve savings. You're here to help them. And I think the more you can help people understand that's genuinely how you think about that, that's why you're here, and that your actions demonstrate that, the better. And it's once you've gone down the wrong road, it is rescuable, but it gets harder as you break that trust that we were talking about at the beginning, and people sort of get beat up on from senior management or something because you've been loose with savings figures that aren't achievable or something. Then yeah, it becomes a lot harder to get that trust back.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I actually kind of, Steph, I'd love your experience and input here, but we find more and more now that when we work with a customer that they might have someone who specializes in optimization, which 5 years ago when optics started wasn't really a thing, right? Not a lot of companies had like a team or a FinOps team or things like that. And so there are times that we'll come in and I mean, that team's going to be defensive, right? That is their job. And so, Steph, I'm curious, like for you, when you're working with a customer, how have you approached that when you walk in and they're like, oh, we've already got really good practices, we know what we're doing. Like, how do you help kind of get that trust and build that bridge that John's talking about?
Yeah, I love it when a customer has someone there already. It doesn't make our lives easier. It just makes their lives easier. Or when I've seen someone hire someone, like kind of working with them, it's always really cool to see that development of a FinOps team that's happening in some of my customers. But yeah, there's a customer I'm thinking of that I've worked a lot with recently. They have a really strong, like probably the strongest FinOps setup in a company I've seen. And the good thing is, I don't think they ever saw it as not consulting, obviously, no offense, John, consulting, but like I'm not coming in to like replace them or do anything. I'm just there to help. And so what they have now is a direct line to someone who is has availability to sometimes data they don't have, can look across things, has kind of their fingers in lots of different new kind of pockets of information. And I think they use us more like a resource. And I would definitely be the same if I was back at KPMG and then optics had been assigned to us. I probably would have been super defensive and been like, I can do it. I'm fine. I'm amazing. I don't need anybody else. But then I think it's all about, like we've been talking about, is showing people like where they're doing well and how you can help them. The biggest thing I do is go in and say, okay, you guys are doing these amazing jobs. What can I help with? Because everybody has pain points, whether it's about chargeback, whether it's about education, whether they've heard of this new tool and they don't know how to use it. Could be something as complex as writing a script, or it could be just setting them up with the Kudos dashboard. So for us, probably the longest intro before I've mentioned the Kudos dashboard.
We made it 22 minutes. No,
20 minutes.
One thing that's important to do, I also, especially when I was first starting out, and now it's my favorite thing to do, but ask to learn from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, I can do my job better if I know what's successful for other companies and customers, and tell me like what works for you guys. Teach me the inner workings. I know, Steph, when you joined the team, we asked you to present on what worked at KPMG, right? What did you do that was helpful, and what practices did you put in place?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think this kind of leads us perfectly onto, John, the third thing we talked about, which was feedback loops, right, which is something I don't think people take seriously enough for this kind of work. But yeah, do you want to explain what we mean by feedback loops?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe let me carry on the example. So you've done your homework, you've understood as much of the context as you can, but you're not always going to be able to figure everything out. You'll get some things wrong. You'll misguess what a particular tag meant or something, or there'll be some context you don't have, and that's fine. When you have the conversation with engineers, they're going to give you lots of additional information. They'll give you feedback on that understanding. It might be, I don't know, you're right, all these instances are underutilized, but actually we've got to keep 100% headroom because the way our system works, we keep DR capacity for one region in another. So we've got to keep enough space in case that failover happens. So that's why these are so underutilized. Maybe we can shrink them a bit, but not as much as you think. And great, okay, so you've learned more information. Now, what of course isn't going to work, and we all know this from sort of when we're dealing with companies, I often use the analogy of a recruitment consultant. If you you get your batch of CVs, load of it's noise, you give the feedback, week later, new batch of CVs come through, 80% of them, same thing that you just gave the feedback on. Did they not listen? I'm just not going to bother this time, forget it. And so the same here. If you go back and, well, here you go, same list of instances, haven't taken into account the fact you need that headroom, this guy's going to be, well, come on, didn't we have a conversation? You're wasting my time here. So, yeah, listen to what they're saying, understand. If it doesn't make sense, ask questions to make sure you've really understood it, and then, yeah, go and do something with that. Maybe the tool allows you to configure some parameters to change the recommendations, or use the information you've got.
Yeah, definitely. We have that where in one of our reports, we can see how much a customer is utilizing their savings plans. And so one of our customers was really underutilizing, or maybe it's RIs, I can't remember, but they made an active goal to like to get as much as they could to kind of collaborate with that so they could get it covered. And they got to a point and they were like, Steph, we can't do anymore. None of our other instances can be covered by this. And then we were like, okay, so we just stopped looking at that. Like we look and we say, okay, it's going to run out in 3 months anyway. You've done some amazing work. When you repurchase, let's look at doing this and then bring it back up later in time. And you're right. Just feedback is probably one of the most important things. If anyone wants to give the show any feedback, feel free to email us at costoptimization@amazon.com. If you want to tell us what you like about this or don't, or what you want to see us talk about, that's always really good. But yeah, any really cool things you've seen work with feedback, Alex?
Man, I mean, I think we're building relationships, right? And it's not just here's what to do to fix, see you in a couple of years. And we get better, the customer gets better, what we can teach and what we can say on things like Twitch get better when we have that feedback loop. And so not just seeing, hey, you achieved these savings, yay, but then talking to the customer about, okay, what worked? How did you end up implementing this? To me, I know I've said this many times before, but when a team or a group within a company starts making those changes and it's worked, have them highlight it. Have them create a video or a demonstration of how they did that. Number one, it's a great opportunity for them in their career, right? They get to highlight a win and work that they've done and put themselves in a new situation. Number two, I mean, I personally am more likely to do something or make a change in my day-to-day work habits and movements if I know that I have a peer that did it and was really successful at doing that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think not only gathering that feedback, but then highlighting that feedback and showing that it matters.
Yeah, that's definitely the showing that you put something in place because somebody said it, I think is really good. Plus, I think it feels good to like make that change and then point out to someone and be like, okay, we listened to your feedback and we did this. It's a super powerful thing. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. John, is there any kind of final bits of advice that you'd want to give people to kind of really take away today to go and help their developers?
So I probably haven't said the words enough, so let me say them again. Context, empathy. No, seriously, for me, it all does come down to that. It's be willing to learn, understand, build the relationships. It's not I sit in a different room and I fire out reports demanding you do stuff. It's very much a people thing. Get out there, talk to people, learn, understand, iterate.
Yeah, and then John gave us his blog. Check it out for some kind of more in-depth information on it as well. Alex, any kind of final thoughts, feedback? Sorry, tips for people?
Feedback loop.
Yeah.
No, I love this. I think, when we were prepping for this episode, the pieces about feedback loop and like really ingraining yourselves in the company culture are things that we haven't fully gone into in previous episodes, right? We talk about how people can transform their culture and be more cost aware. But as someone who's there to help, right? Or if you're starting a new job, or if you're trying to figure out what is this FinOps world? Is this something career path wise that I could take? Those are really important pieces of it. And I know Steph, I believe, is on a podcast later, and she's talking about kind of her career into it. And I think that highlights a lot of the things we talked about today of, how do you learn and how do you learn from others and how do you help kind of transform that culture together?
Yeah, definitely. And guys, don't worry, I'll share the link to the podcast when it becomes available. It was a really good time. But yeah, the whole the feedback loop, I think I know I'm going back to it, but it's really important. I often say it for things like the Kudos dashboard, because there's stuff in there. That dashboard, if you look at it, is a lot of information in there. And if you give that to a developer or finance or a finance practitioner, somebody, and they read through it, there might be information in there that they don't care about, but it's going to be there all the time. So the good thing is you can edit that quick start dashboard and then get rid of the stuff you don't like.
Oh yeah, definitely. I do have one thing to add, and this kind of goes for feedback in this world and all worlds, but ask people the kind of feedback they want, right? don't just assume that what you operate on works really well for everyone. And so as you're making these changes, and if you're going to make real big changes that we've been talking about, say like, what kind of feedback's helpful, and tell them what kind of feedback's helpful for you. I think that's huge.
Yeah, it's a good management tip there.
Actually connected with that very quickly as well. Yeah, I mean, don't invite feedback as well. Sometimes the teams will feel they can't. So yeah, I mean, periodically just kind of, we've been working together on this a month. How do you think it's going? Yeah, and any feedback for me.
Open dialogue. Great. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, John, for coming. Nice to see you, Alex. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And we'll be back next week with forecasting with a customer story, which I'm also really excited about. So yeah, see you all next week, and you can watch us on YouTube later. Thanks. Bye.